Thank you all for joining us. My name is Shan Biastisha, and I'm part of the leadership team at And Digital, and specifically the club executive. For those of you that don't know, and we are a technology business that has grown to over 700 people in the last 5 years, and we are top 10 Sunday Times best company to work for. But before I tell you more about us, just to run through the terms and conditions of this particular meeting. So please stay on mute during the talk. We're recording the session, so if you don't want to be seen, could you please turn your camera off? If you can type any questions into the chat pane, and I will pick those up and we will answer the questions at the end. If you have to dash at 1:30 on the dot, that's okay. We might run over by a few minutes. So at And, we build interesting and complex products using an array of technologies. But what makes us quite different to other companies is that whilst working with our clients, we upskill them and build their internal capabilities. During COVID, we have moved to a distributed, co-located model and have pioneered successful ways of continuing to build remotely, but importantly, continually to upskill. And this has been reflected in the feedback that we've received, both from our clients and from our Andes. It has never been more important to ensure security, reliability, and scalability of your applications and IT infrastructure. Cloud is an essential strategy for enterprise, automation, and business agility. It allows you to scale infrastructure as and when your business priorities change, whilst reducing risks and costs. We have a number, moving on, not very good with my, presentation, apologies. We have a number of exciting roles available in our newly formed cloud business unit, and I would encourage you to apply. You will be joining a great organization that truly values you as an individual and loves innovation and cloud, of course. So these are the roles that are available, and if there are any that you see that you find exciting, please apply at or scan the QR code. I'm very, very pleased that we have an all-woman panel today, which has been a very much traditionally male-dominated domain. I would like to introduce Romy van Es, who is a partner solutions architect at Amazon Web Services. And I'm going to now stop sharing so that Romy can start sharing.
Perfect. Thank you, Shan. Can you see my screen at the moment? Just checking. Perfect. All right. Yeah, good day, everyone, and thank you for having me today. I'm Romy van Es. I'm a partner solution architect at Amazon Web Services. And in my day today, I work with AWS partners to help them grow their technical capabilities, and I support them with any enablement on that. So cloud migrations are a big part of these capabilities that I work with my partners on. And today I would like to give you a good foundation of what it means to start your cloud migration journey. So when working on cloud migrations with partners or with customers, I always get a bit excited, as each migration project in the end is an interesting puzzle that is defined by the business needs and the business priorities of the customers. In the end, every cloud migration journey starts with asking the why question. Why do you want to migrate? What is your business driver? So there are many different drivers to initiate the journey to AWS, but to understand the full set of drivers, it is important to first understand what the cloud can offer, and specifically the AWS Cloud today. The AWS Cloud offers a broad and deep platform with on-demand delivery of IT resources and a pay-as-you-go pricing model. This means that the process of buying and maintaining data centers is now all done by AWS, and you only pay for the IT resources that you actually use. To do that, the AWS Cloud has over 200 IT services that support any workload that the customer might have, and those services are then available to you over a network connection with the click of a button. This means that your teams can now start spending time on the activities that actually provide business value through innovation rather than maintaining any costly hardware. So when considering these benefits of the AWS Cloud, Companies can be driven to migration by compelling events such as the closing of a data center or any end-of-life hardware. And their first interest around these topics then usually lies around cost reduction that the AWS Cloud can offer compared to their on-premises. But the conversation is actually shifting further than that topic of cost savings, and companies are looking to reinvest that cost saving in order to move faster and transform their customer experiences. You can, for example, increase your global footprint by using the AWS global infrastructure, and you can start your digital transformation or use cutting-edge technologies such as IoT or AI/ML. So as I said, the typical focus then is around that cost reduction and these cost savings. And it's relevant to look at that for a bit because they are significant. Through pay-as-you-go pricing model and that on-demand scalability, you can save costs in your TCO by being able to only pay for the resources that you use. But you can also save costs by leveraging our discount consumption models, for instance, for instances, such as spot instances, savings plans, or reserved instances. However, the most compelling cloud benefits actually lie in 3 different domains, and these especially come up if you start thinking about the long-term investment of moving to the cloud. The first of these 3 is staff productivity, where before your teams would spend time in maintaining, provisioning your hardware, they can now spend that server configuration time on innovating your systems, making them more efficient, or work on features that directly provide business value. Next is the operational resilience. As with the AWS Cloud, you can leverage global infrastructure that uses the concept of availability zones and regions to plan for disaster recovery, for example, by spinning up a secondary site. Or you can have data backups located in case of downtime. This allows you to improve your solution SLAs and provide a more resilient operational model. But finally, moving to the cloud is also about making your business more agile, which is something that we will see later on with Ant Digital and Anne Brown. As with the IT resources available to you on demand, your teams can start to build small POCs and develop new features faster. At the same time, as instances can also be spun down on demand, you can end an experiment with the click of the same button without the risk that you usually have of the upfront investment into the new technologies that the experiment would require. Alrighty. So having seen these benefits and drivers of why you would want to migrate, a set of common questions might come up in your mind. For example, how do I understand the business potential that I can have for my environment? Or how do I even know what's in my environment? You might have rushed applications and infrastructure that have been put into place in the last decades, which you may not be aware about today. But it's also about questions on how can I get my team upskilled to operate the technologies during and after the migration? And how can I make sure that the team is engaged and committed to work with me on this migration journey, as that will be key to its success. So to do that, AWS has invested in 6 major areas, as we want to invest the experience that we have with the migration projects into giving you the tools to succeed. So the most important one is the methodology. We know that migrations are not a simple project, and we want to give you an approach to execute on and help you achieve the business outcomes that you target in the first place. We've also looked at the tooling and the capabilities that customers need to be efficient in migration activities, such as the diagnosis of your environment, determining an optimal sequence of your migration of the applications, or actually to do the migration. So to do this, we have actually also required third-party companies that had those tools in order to bring them to customers faster. And we even do that for free in most cases. On top of that, we work closely with our partners like Ant Digital in order to establish common standards for success, to make sure that when a customer signs up for a large migration with one of our partners, they can be confident that it will be a success. And we do that by setting common benchmarks on what good looks like and by providing partner-specific trainings on migrations. Similarly, with our training teams, we looked at what training customers might need to fill any of their capability gaps. And we have set up specific training curricula to scope out what kind of roles are relevant for a migration effort and to provide team-specific trainings to build those new capabilities. And finally, in order to overcome that initial investment that you need to get into your journey, we have made available several funding options that you can utilize in every stage of your migration to make it a success. So we've talked about all these tools, but they will be relevant in different phases of the migration journey. And if we look at a migration journey, typically we distinguish 3 phases that we at AWS call assess, mobilize, and migrate and modernize. So let's look at each of these phases. Let's start with assess. So the assess phase is where you define the initial case for doing the migration. So here you determine which business driver is key to your migration, but it's also the moment where you look at the current state of your systems. So we encourage all our customers to do assessments in order to understand what the total savings potential could be. And it's important to realize that you need to do assessments in 2 dimensions. The first is to do a rapid discovery of your applications in order to scope out the specifics of your environment. And you want to do a TCO comparative analysis between your on-prem and your cloud environment. The second dimension is actually to look at the readiness of your organization and your staff, as operating cloud often requires a different organizational model and culture, as well as that you need skills and different kinds of tools that are available in the cloud. So out of these 2 assessments, you identify what areas you need to grow your capability in, and then you can start to do some short-term technical enablement, for which we offer AWS Immersion Days. So AWS Immersion Days are full-day events on a specific service topic with standardized modular content and hands-on labs. So doing an immersion day will then give you that initial engagement going with the teams on the skills that they need. But it will also allow them to gain that confidence to work with new technologies, which is key to having them on board for the rest of the project. All right, so once you've done those initial diagnostics and you have specified the areas you want to build your capability in, you move to the mobilize phase, which is 2 to 6 months. It is there that you build the foundations of your cloud journey. And typically you start with building a landing zone. So a landing zone provides you with the core account structure that you run your cloud workloads in. And it also is a secure way of doing that. You can use services like AWS Control Tower to deploy this core account structure in minutes, and with the right automation in place to set up a secure environment. In the mobilize phase, you also build your migration plan to migrate your applications over. It's here that you determine the sequence in which you migrate your applications, but you also define the operating model that you will want to be using after the migration. For the operating model, you can consider different approaches. You can consider managing your deployments yourself, but you can also utilize AWS managed services or partner managed capabilities to give some of that management work away. Then another important topic is security and compliance, which is something you will want to be considering before migrating over. So at AWS, we use a model called the shared responsibility model for security, where we describe that AWS takes care of part of the security, namely the security of the cloud. So this is security around the host OS layer down to the physical layer. In the end, it's the customer that needs to take care of the security of whatever they put in the cloud. So that includes encryption, but also identity and access management to their workloads. And you will want to make sure that your compliance is also up to date. So you make sure your data is compliant before you put it in the cloud, but you also want to develop runbooks and automations to achieve a good security posture. So in order to do that development of your security posture, you can use our AWS well-architected framework as a way to define what mechanisms you should put into place according to best practices. This is done for security as well as for 4 other pillars, namely reliability, operational efficiency, performance efficiency, and what's the last one? Cost optimization, in order to get the best practice around your whole entire environment. But the key activity in the end, in the mobilize phase, is to build the skills of your teams that are required during the migration, as well as afterwards to operate your environment. You will want to build the skills across different teams, namely IT teams, security teams, but also across key business roles in order to really adopt that cloud culture. So to do this, we have developed a specific training capability at AWS where you can get access to specific digital training around how to build migration practices. But you can also attend classroom training, both in person or virtually, where you can have a dedicated trainer help you teach the skills that you need to operate. We also have a cloud certification capability where we have certifications per role type, which helps you to maintain the right skill set across your organization. So finally, once you've done all that, you arrive to the migrate and modernize phase where you execute your large scale migrations, you get your applications over, and you start to operate your cloud. So as you see, there are many activities that are part of the migration process, and it can be daunting to have to take that all up on your own. It is therefore that we recommend working with one of our AWS partners, as the partner can help you with any phase of the migration journey. And that includes any of the activities that we just mentioned, whether it's shaping your business case with you, doing the assess phase, whether they would migrate your workloads over for you, or they can even help you upskill your staff on the required skills. So to accomplish this with you, partners have established AWS migration practices that we as AWS work on with our partners. And for this, we have set up that benchmark to define the partner capability. So we have the migration competency designation, and we do capability review processes to evaluate that the partner has the right skills in-house. We also make sure that the AWS, that their consultants are AWS certified for you to be confident that they can deal with your workloads. Finally, when working with partners, there's specific funding available from AWS in all phases of the migration journey in order to accelerate the collaboration towards your journey. And with that, it is an honor to hand over to Tina Howell, who's part of one of our successful AWS partners and digital, to tell us about a real-life case in which they work together with our customer N Brown on their AWS cloud migration.
Thank you very much, Romy. Hopefully you can see that all. So I'm just going to hand over to Diane so that she can go through and introduce N Brown.
Sorry, just to go off mute. Thank you, Tina. So welcome, my name's Diane Roland and I am the Head of Cloud and Platform at N Brown. I just wanted to take a few moments just to introduce N Brown for anyone who's not familiar with us. We are a top 10 clothing and footwear digital retailer based in the centre of Manchester. We've been around for over 160 years. Our core retail brands that we trade on are JD Williams, Simply Be, Ambrose Wilson, Giacomo and Home Essentials. And we employ over 2,000 people across the UK. And our key purpose at N Brown, it really is all about making our customers look and feel amazing. And that's what we strive to do every day. As part of our digital strategy, we really wanted to make a move to utilising the cloud, as we felt it was the right time to leverage all the benefits the cloud could offer us in agility. And we specifically chose AWS as we felt that at the time they had the most maturity of the available cloud providers. We've chosen for now to work predominantly with AWS as our sole cloud provider to get our experience up and running first before considering adding any further complexities to the model. And as such, we started our AWS journey early in 2018. And as part of this, we partnered with And Digital. And I've been working with them on our cloud migrations since May of that year. And on that point now, straight back over to Tina. Thank you.
Thank you, Diane. So we've been working with N Brown, obviously since May 2018. And when we first came into N Brown to assist, we really looked at their AWS and where they were at. And really, they were just using it for dev environments. So what we did was we looked at what we needed to do. So we did a bit of discovery. We give them what maybe would be their cloud strategy, and we set some foundations. So they really wanted a monitoring and logging platform. So in that July period, we built an ELK system that basically forwarded all the logs from the IBM soft layer data centers to actually that logging platform so that we could turn off developer access to those platforms. And in September 2018, we worked on bringing Hybris, and Hybris is an e-commerce platform. So it had 6 brands on it, and it was actually for the US brands and Home and Mighty. We completed that in May of 2019, and then we started the SCV migration. So that's Talent D, it's a customer management system. And again, we migrate that into a short period of time. And the main reason we did that was because we learned a lot of lessons off the Hybris migration. And then in November 2019, we started the FMW. It's a big platform, it's Fusion middleware, it's an Oracle platform. It's very complicated to move. It has over 1,000 integration points. And now in December of this year, we're now going to complete that. And then in June 2021, we're going to hopefully decom the data centers, and obviously they will save a lot of money doing that. So, oops. Okay, so AWS have talked about like how they do migrations, but obviously we do it kind of iteratively with clients. So we do a discovery phase. What is the cloud strategy? What does the existing infrastructure look like? Map out what needs to be moved and when by. We lay the foundation, so the AWS landing zone, the network strategy, the environment strategy. How do we need to integrate into the AWS platforms, the tools required and the security required. We then do some build. So we build platforms using infrastructure as code tools like Terraform, like CloudFormation, and many tools out there. We POC work if we're not sure it will work. So we had to do that on Hybris. A good understanding is that we knew that the client really wanted to use containers, but actually the image itself was over 10 gig. That's really hard to get into some of the container platforms. So we did a proof of concept. We learned fast that it wasn't really the best fit. We went back to using a load balancer with EC2 instances, and I'll come on to that a little bit later. We then build development platforms up to production. We then assist in migration, so develop a migration plan, data transfer strategy, and understanding the testing required. And we assist in migrating the platform with the client. And then as part of that, the next phase is assist the client in supporting the platform, but also training their own people to build their own capability. I think that's really important, is that, you know, like Hybris is no longer managed by, and actually within 6 months of us handing it over, it's actually now managed by N Brown. So Hybris Migration. So this is the only platform I'm going to talk about today, because I could talk for hours about the other migrations because they're very long migrations. So, but I want to talk about is really the pain points of Hybris, because it actually played into a lot of the issues that we saw in the other platforms later in the migration journey. So manual deployments took 5 to 6 hours to complete. We took a server out of the load balancer, we upgraded it, and then we put it back in. They were all manual platforms. So basically, it means that if there was a problem with the platform or the instance itself, basically, it would take a long time for it to be fixed. We provisioned a provision of a new platform took about 8 weeks. So every time they wanted to add in a new platform, they had to wait for capacity to be available. That capacity had to be hard, you know, like new Dell servers put into the VMware clusters, and then they could actually manually build the platforms from there. So rolling back took a shorter period of time than actually doing the upgrade, but if they were doing database changes, which was quite often, they couldn't actually roll back, they had to roll forward. Because all the platforms were different and the way that the config was managed, generally the quality of code was quite low, and testing was done later, so more like in pre-prod rather than actually maybe in the dev platform, you know, a lower down platform. So all accessing the logs was done by was available to everybody, so they could access any server anyway, which means that we couldn't keep config the same. So we'd find out that we'd do a deployment to go from like dev to QA, and actually there would be an inconsistency within the config, and then we'd have to roll back to actually see what the inconsistency would be. So scaling and self-healing meant manual installation. So every time something failed, we had to reinstall a new server from scratch. Licensing, people, platform costs was generally very high within the team. And that was because the cost to maintain the platform was very high. Capability was low. So being able to move the team be able to move the platforms to AWS, we had to actually help N Brown build up their capability need. And the amount of interfaces that we had to move. So we started at 57, then we went to 107, and then we went to 199 over a period of time, because people had forgotten that there was integrations into different platforms, you know, things like the mainframe and Teradata that people had who knew about them, but actually they'd just been working for a long time, so people had forgotten about them. So the Hybris Layers. So this is what we found. We had 4 layers on the Hybris platform. So it was basically an Apache layer, and that handled all the redirects for SEO and anything that needed to be forwarded on. But actually that was inside their network. It wasn't outside their network. And to be able to load balance the applications, we had to, they used ModJK, which is a software load balancer on the servers themselves. So the application was the Hybris product, then there was bespoke code, Impex data, and obviously within the application servers, there was also mount points for shared media and also images. We had a search layer, which was an Apache Solr setup, which was master worker setup. And obviously then we had an Oracle rack infrastructure with Oracle DB situated in it. So this was actually the setup that we were given. This is actually the diagram. And as you can see, we had a back office set up. So each of these clusters were static. So if a server failed here, basically it would have to be re-implemented into the same static cluster. So each area of the business, so the back office uses the storefront, and then the contact center had a different way to actually get into the platform itself. But the setup was the same. So each had an Apache layer, a Hybris layer, and then obviously down here, the database layer with the media mounts. And the search area was done through like the master worker area. So, but it wasn't actually highly resilient. So if a worker failed or the master failed, definitely the master, basically the whole thing would go down. So, and that's the setup for the Hybris architecture. So the key considerations: refactor where you need to do it. Do I need developer assistance? Using the right tooling? How much can we automate versus how much we actually can when it's a monolith platform? What can we remove from the existing architecture and use as an AWS service? I think that was one of the important things here, was choosing the right services to move that platform over to, that would give the best way to manage and maintain that platform. How can we migrate the database? What's our data migration strategy? And how much downtime can we have? Is it limited or none? So the tooling that we chose was we're going to use Jenkins. And the reason for Jenkins is that it's highly configurable. And the way that we knew that the pipeline was configured was that basically we needed to use a bit of bash scripting to help support the application deployment. We used AWS for all the elasticity and scalability. We used Terraform for infrastructure as code. We used Puppet to bootstrap and self-heal. So that's where all the config was applied on top of once we put the systems up. We used a HashiCorp Packer to create the image. And then obviously we used Git, which is to store the code. We actually built a GitLab infrastructure to be able to support this actually within AWS for the client. So how did we refactor each layer? And I think we had to choose where we needed to place things. So Apache, we moved the redirects to Fastly, and then the load balancer was moved to the Elastic Load Balancer. So this layer actually was completely removed from the setup. We moved all the redirects to the edge of the network, so they didn't have to go any further into the network. They could be redirected quite quickly. We had then the application layer refactored. So things like we used Amazon EC2 with the Amazon Elastic File System. And then obviously we had an AMI created using Packer. So AMI was created, Amazon EC2 came up using Terraform, Jenkins applied all of the code on top. And then basically the media share would always have to be added to as part of the EC2 instance. And that's the application layer. So the biggest actually part of refactoring the Hybris platform was actually that we needed to get the search layer to be highly resilient and high availability. So we actually had to spike out a new tool called Solr Cloud. And this actually gave us a full highly resilient. So Zookeeper gave us a cluster. And then Solr Cloud was the Solr servers themselves that were part of this cluster. So if one Superkeeper node went down, basically it would stay up. And if a Solr Cloud instance went down, basically the search would continue. And this took us actually the longest part of it. To get it stable was actually about 4 weeks. And the reason for that is that it would only work with certain OSs. So once we worked it out, it was quite easy to generate the AMI and basically apply the code on top, and it was good to go. So the database refactoring. So we're using Oracle RAC, which had lots of databases in. The Hybris database was 400 gig, and we converted it to Amazon RDS, which was using the Oracle Bring Your Own License standard version. So this is what the Hybris architecture looked like. So you can see there's actually quite similarities to the old architecture. We only re-architected where we needed to. So storefront, contact center, back office, and cron jobs. So this is the difference. This was actually just one cluster, and the nodes became dynamic. So we implemented dynamic clustering within the Hybris product. We noticed that a lot of bandwidth was done on the cron job server. So we separated that out, and that gave us the availability that basically if cron job server was struggling, we could actually scale up that area. We also had the integration point where we needed Oracle ODI to be able to integrate with Fusion middleware. So all of the integration points went through Fusion middleware, and that had to go through soft layer. And what you can see here is that we had 2 ways to communicate. We used the transit gateway. I have to give my hats off to AWS because this was like 18 months ago. And I was really struggling to get the network part in because we have like, as you can see, each environment has its own VPC. And that means that they're very siloed platforms. We were working out how we can get all these VPNs in from all these data centers, which was Amsterdam, London, and also Griffin House, where they house some other infrastructure. And the day that we're trying to look at the network setup is actually the day that they brought out Transit Gateway. And it actually really saved us about 2 months of work, of re-networking work, to be able to actually bring this in sooner. So we were due for July, and we brought it in by May 2019. Again, we had a management area where we deployed the Jenkins, and that applied the application to the environment. And as you can see, most of it was using AWS services. And I think the biggest thing that was changed is that we could bring up a platform and deploy the code within 1 hour and 22 minutes. So no longer 8 weeks, no longer 5 hours to do a deployment. It's clean infrastructure each time. Each platform gives you the same configuration, and it was doing blue-green deployment. So we'd bring a platform up on the side, you could test it, and then we could put it into the main load balancer once finished. And very proud of this piece of work, because it set really up N Brown up for the rest of the journey. And hopefully that journey comes to a conclusion in June with its decommissioning. So I'm going to now hand over to Diane from N Brown.
Thanks very much, Tina. So to follow on from that really good technical overview of what we did and how we achieved it, I'm just going to take a few minutes to talk through the benefits that we've seen from the migration to AWS at N Brown, the lessons that we've learned from that first migration that we took into the following ones, and then a bit about some considerations on how to plan for success in the cloud. And then finally, just quickly cover off some suggestions where you could go next on your AWS journey when you've moved that first workload, from our experience and what we're doing at N Brown. Okay, so first are the benefits that we've seen. Platform flexibility. So there is so much more flexibility working in the cloud that we found. Just take the number of supporting services that AWS offer. As Romy mentioned previously, there's over 200 of them to date, from infrastructure services like compute, storage, databases, to more emerging technologies like machine learning, artificial intelligence, data lakes, and analytics. And the ability to just turn on a service you need within seconds to respond to that new need makes AWS so much more flexible than a traditional infrastructure model. And we found that we're able to respond to business needs so much quicker, with the ability to increase or decrease capacity as required to support those key business trading periods, like one-off promotions, or like the current one that's upon us imminently, Cyber Week. So we also see great flexibility in our ability to transition from full brand to service and capability migrations with the tools that the cloud's offering us. Security. So AWS, as you probably know, is a shared security model. And we ensured that our InfoSec team were engaged from day one of the Hybris build, working together to produce a platform that was classed as gold standard by our internal security team. And this was reflected in our internal penetration testing. We ensured that we worked through the AWS well-architected review, which was incredibly useful to me, actually. I was new to AWS in the cloud when we started this move, and just really understanding those principles of the AWS architectures and how we've tried to apply that with Hybris and the future work that we can still do really helps show us not only those best practices, but also how to operate and maintain in the cloud. And we're continuing to build on our security posture with all the further migrations that we're undertaking. So Tina's touched on this one already, but the reduced environment turnaround time. So yeah, previously it was about 8 weeks to create a new environment into a working production state. Not helpful when you're trying to move to a more agile way of working. And once we migrated to AWS, we did find that we can spin up that new technical environment in about an hour and a half. So yeah, big differences there. And this alone allows you to really change how you're thinking about your pace of change and modernization when you're working in that cloud. Deployments. So again, I know Tina's alluded to this. So the rolling deployments used to take a whole day really to roll out the change with the confidence that it had been tested and was working without causing disruption to customers and contact center advisors. Now the deployments are completed in an hour using the blue-green deployments wherever possible. We're also able to devolve responsibility to the squad and the developers to run their own deployments through to production in many cases. And with the creation of the separate deployment pipelines, in, for example, our single customer view deployment, the squad are now able to deploy their changes weekly to production with much greater confidence. Whereas in the legacy estate, with the complexity of the monolith code base, monthly releases really are as frequently as we can undertake. Cost reduction. So the key purpose of moving to the cloud for us wasn't fundamentally about cost reduction. And moving to the cloud for me isn't always the cheaper option. But what we did, however, find with our Hybris migration is that after that initial migration, the running costs in AWS were slightly higher than the previous infrastructure. But after go live, once we'd achieved that initial stability, we focused some time then on cost and efficiency. And from the cost perspective, we undertook work to ensure that we were sized correctly for the workload and that we were turning things off when we didn't need them. And through these efforts, we actually reduced our running costs to the point that we were running 27% cheaper on the new platform than the old one. And we also found that we were able to reduce our server startup times by 20 minutes with work and reducing complexity in the process. And changes like that really help when we're trying to deploy changes or we encounter issues with servers. And then finally on this one, increased automation. So this was a key benefit for us of moving to the cloud and trying to change the team's mindset to automation. The team are now constantly looking to automate whatever they can, whenever they can, and having the tools at their disposal to enable this and realizing that the more they work to this mantra, the more they're actually able to focus on those higher value activities and the more exciting challenges rather than those repetitive tasks of days gone by. Okay, on to lessons learned then from this is from our first large migration piece, which obviously for us was the biggest initial learning. So a key agreement on working with And Digital for both parties was that they would help train the existing N Brown engineers in working with the cloud, Terraform, architecting in the cloud, automation, all that good stuff. But as the existing team were also working to deliver existing initiatives and support our legacy websites 24/7, this became a real challenge from the start. I'm sure Tina will agree. With best intentions, we quickly realized that team capacity was going to be an issue in transferring the skills. And this was going to be something that needed a key focus in our upcoming further initiatives if we were going to be able to stand on our own 2 feet in the future. Okay, inconsistencies. So virtual hands up. Who's got great legacy test environments with no inconsistencies of data and config? My hand's not going up. Sadly, the longer you've been around as a business, the more things become out of sync. And which business really recognizes the need to spend money and time on developing great test environments against their want to deliver that next new, shiny, sexy piece of tech and the business benefit? It's really hard balance. And as a result of this, it meant we found inconsistencies between platforms and backends. So testing couldn't always be completed with as much confidence as we wanted when we were migrating into live. So we had to focus on the 80-20 rule. We'd tested what we believed to be 80%, and any issues with the rest we would have to be prepared to forward fix. and it wasn't as painful as it could have been. So the next one relates to priorities really as well. So if you're going to do this, it needs to be clearly recognised as a priority, not just to the immediate team working on it. When we started on our AWS journey, it was poorly recognised really for just how much impact it would have on all the teams. And probably from my own perspective as well, I didn't really kind of get to grips with how much impact it would have. And getting everyone's buy-in was so important to ensure success. We ran AWS immersion days, as mentioned by Romy earlier, and lunchtime brown bag sessions to try to immerse people into AWS as much as we could. And they were really successful to trying to get people's buy-in early doors. Okay, on a similar theme of understanding then, the developers also need a good exposure to AWS. I think initially the squads believed that they would ask for an AWS platform and the engineers would go away and they'd come back and they'd just hand it over, off you go. But actually there is work required from both platform engineers and developers working together to automate that platform. And this took a bit of time to understand, and we're getting there, but I think we still have some challenges today with that one. Okay, not taking on too much at once. So this is about trying to take on just enough at one time. So initially when we looked at this, we thought it was a really great idea as part of the migration to migrate away from Oracle DB over to MySQL. And as we further looked at the complexities of this, we realized, although it was a good idea, it was just too much change at this point in time and it added too many complexities. So as a result of this, further down the line, we agreed to use Amazon RDS to retain that Oracle database and tackle this at a later point. So that lesson, just try not to make life too hard for yourself all in one go. There's loads of good ideas and loads of good things you can do, but it doesn't all have to be done at once. Encouraging fast-paced growth. So working with AWS has increased our pace of change phenomenally, and we are going to make mistakes. And I think it's just recognises that these mistakes should be deemed as required and not about creating a blame culture. The key is putting up those guardrails to allow people to try new things within an agreed boundary. We're doing a lot more proof of concepts now than ever before, and we can do those because it's so much easier to spin something up, try out a new theory or a new solution, and then discard it if it's not right for what we need, or if it works, well, you're halfway there already with the solution, which is a great benefit. So some migrations will be hard and you will be reliant on finding information to help you move. We did struggle. We didn't find much that was helpful with the Hybris migration in terms of information to help us move. And even Hybris SAP didn't have this information. So I think just that understanding that it can be challenging, try and get help where you can, but some of it is a learning curve. And then finally, the introduction of new technologies did initially leave some people behind, as we still need to support the legacy infrastructure through that transition to the new. The lesson here really is just recognising this and reassuring the team that this is okay. And we have got plans to move you over to the new technology at the right time. Don't just ignore it and then have half a team feeling really disgruntled at being left out. Okay, so I've talked around some of the lessons we've learned, and then I just wanted to cover off some of the key appreciations that we've taken from those lessons and working in the cloud to help you plan for success. So appreciating your current operating model. Working in the cloud, it's a very different beast, but you do really need to appreciate what you're working with and any constraints you've got, and then look at how best you can adapt to that new way of working. Training. So yeah, the days of long classroom training sessions just aren't practical, especially in the current climate. But what AWS do offer in this space that we found is that wealth of online learning. So my guys have used a lot of stuff, including content posted on YouTube, AWS blogs, and then of course their own website offering information on all their products and services. So they've got a great programmer certification that Romy alluded to earlier, which we've tapped into to allow the team to increase their skills on AWS, along with giving themselves a certification for their own CVs. It's not just about us, sadly. Also, there's definitely an awareness of skill set for that operational versus build role. So some people are going to be better at helping design and build new AWS solutions, and others are better at focusing on the operational support and how to optimize that workload that's running in production. Both are key necessities, and it's just tuning into people's abilities and what interests them. So a good partner. When you're new to AWS, having that good partner to work with on this journey really is a key element to success. It's all new, and where do you start? And that's exactly where we were. A partner who's got experience doing this before and has gone through a lot of those mistakes already can help you avoid some of these to get to the right solution quicker. Tina and her cloud of Mary platform engineers have been invaluable to us on this journey to get us where we are now and with our use of AWS. And I honestly don't think that we would have been where we are now without them and their help. Also AWS, so getting that great relationship with your AWS team and account manager is imperative. They've offered us so much advice and help, both myself and the M Brown team across many different avenues across using AWS. And Danny Bircham, our account manager, has been invaluable to this as well. So changing mindset, it's such a different model. It's such a different model for people to get their head around at times, not difficult. And they've got to work at it. For me, working with the team on how we optimize our spend, to our CIO, Adam Warren, taking to the board to ensure that they understand the change in the model and they've got the buy-in for the use of AWS. It is a journey, but it needs to be done to ensure success. It's a very different financial model from that upfront large CapEx investment to that pay-as-you-go model. And it's just getting everybody's buy-in to that. Cost optimization. So yeah, this is my favorite subject, actually. I enjoy the cost optimization piece. So you've got to keep a good eye on your spend in this model to ensure it doesn't get out of control. And AWS have helped us to run sessions with the teams on the keeping the lights on mentality. Turn it off when you don't need it. You wouldn't have your lights in your house turn on overnight when you're sleeping. So why would you be paying for environments and resources when you're not using them? So we recently focused a resource on cost optimization for a period of time. And we managed to obtain a 20% reduction on our overall running costs, which we thought was a really great achievement. But the key is just working out how you can now focus some time and resource on this regularly rather than it having to be that kind of one-off huge exercise. And we're currently using AWS Cost Explorer to understand and report on our costs. And then we're planning on doing some work with QuickSight service to automate some of this better. So a key thing which our AWS account team have helped us with around leveraging AWS discount offerings. So how and when you can apply for an enterprise discount program to receive discounts on the spend, savings plans and reserved instances, which allow saving money on compute, and to the MAPS program, which Romy ran through before, which helps provide that discounting on migration work to AWS. These are all things that we've kind of tapped into and have helped us on our journey. We have seen some really great savings as well with our savings plans so far. And as we move more over onto the cloud, this is something that we will keep expanding on. Finally, creating that safe culture I mentioned earlier, and also ensuring that you're growing talent internally. This is something that's really, really important to me. I came from a graduate background to M Brown many moons ago. And I think growing talent within your organization is really, really important, especially when you move into something that's a newer technology. It's great to be able to try and train up and bring those skills into your organization and be able to stand on your own 2 feet as quickly as possible. Okay, anyway, I've talked more than I thought I would. So very briefly, these are the key things that we at M Brown will be focusing on in the coming year, post our initial migrations, just to give you an idea of a flavour of things that once you've done those initial migrations, you could move on to. So cloud first approach. This doesn't mean that everything we look at building or replacing is going to be done in the cloud, but rather ensuring that we've asked ourselves the question of whether it's the right thing to do to build it in the cloud. And if it's not, that's okay, as long as we've looked at it and understand our reasonings why. But ideally, we want to always ensure that we're evaluating whether cloud's right for us. Completion of the current migration work and then evaluating any further migration work. So the build out of our new microservices architecture and building platforms and deployment pipelines to support this is a key focus for us in the coming year. Reviewing our existing technology estate and understanding where our key priorities are for moving to the cloud. Further building out our data lake. We've done some great work in the area to date, but there's so much more we can do. And then finally, just to finish off, people talk about digital transformations, but the key here is just to emphasize that for us at M Brown, it's not really about a transformation. We're not moving from one thing to another and we'll get to the end. We're on an ongoing journey of transition. We won't get to that point and it be complete. We will continue transitioning on and ensuring that we can remain competitive in today's ever-challenging market. So if you're still with us, thank you very much for sticking with me. And I will now stop sharing and hand back to Shan for the Q&A.
Thank you so much, Diane and Romy and Tina, for what was a really rich and insightful set of presentations. Wow, I'm kind of blown away by all the information. So we do have a couple of questions. So the first one is, what do I need to prepare for the cloud? I don't know which one of you would like to take that one. Maybe start with Diane from a business perspective.
I think it's probably a good place to start really is what Romy discussed earlier around, you know, the assess phase of that migration acceleration plan. So I think there's some really good structure there around it. I think when we started on our journey, we probably didn't go through that process at the start straight away. We just kind of stood up and went, yeah, we want to do the cloud, and it's a really good thing to do. Let's go do the cloud. And actually sitting back and then just looking at your workload and understanding and assessing what you've got and what would benefit from moving to the cloud, and going through that initial exercise. And then potentially, if you haven't got those skills in-house to help you do that, to go out and look for a good partner that you can work with that can help you on that journey.
Tina, anything to add to that in terms of preparation?
I think the first things is ask the question is why, but also are you prepared as a business to actually be able to do it? So do you have the capability? Do you have the right people to help you establish that? Because I think you've got to be able to you've got to have the technical skill set, but you also have to have the like-minded skill set to be able to want to get there. And if you don't, it is actually good to partner with somebody. I'm not just saying it should be and, by the way, but you should find somebody who fits your mold and your culture and help you transition that part of being able to prepare to go to the cloud, because it can actually go horribly wrong if you don't have that.
Romy, in terms of, from your perspective, preparation, but also incentives that you potentially provide that people can leverage?
Yeah, definitely. So in terms of preparation, we always recommend setting up a center of excellence around cloud. So instead of trying to engage all your teams, create a small tiger team that has individuals from all your relevant teams. Think of product teams, security, infrastructure, operations teams, and those people will lead your cloud in the beginning, and you have these people lead the rest of the business units after that. In terms of incentives, as I mentioned before, there is the financial incentives that we have. We have several funding options. We have the migration acceleration program that we saw during this session that gives funding for all the stages of the migration journey when you work with a partner. But there's also other funding incentives for customers. Think of modernization efforts. Once you're going through these kind of migration efforts, then there are specific funding programs for that, or any database freedom engagement that you have. You can also reach out to your account manager and find out about these kind of incentives.
And Diane, you spoke about a 23% cost saving sort of post the implementation. Is there anything else that you've noticed in terms of that from your perspective?
So it's about 27, I think it was, % that we've done that we've seen on the Hybris model when we've looked at kind of platform to platform comparison. But in addition to that, I think leveraging those incentives from AWS have made a big difference as well. I mean, within our I'm trying to think of the numbers off the top of my head now, but within the savings plan, we've seen some really significant discounts. You know, I'm talking at least kind of like 40% discounts at times on our spend, which is fantastic considering this is spend that you're going to be, you know, you are using irrelevant of doing this stuff. And it's just working out the right time of bringing some of these things in. So, you know, firstly, I would focus on getting your workload into production. You know, get over that hump first, and then as soon as you've done that, start looking at what you're using, how you can optimize that spend and that workload in the best way possible, and what discounts can you leverage to help reduce that even more. So yeah, we are seeing some good savings across the board.
Yeah, I think people forget that cost saving gradually it goes up, and then you do savings plans or reserved instances, and then it goes back down again. and then you go back up again, and then you realize that you haven't cleared anything down, and then you go back up, and then you go back down again. And actually, this is what we see with majority of clients, is that basically they have high costs and then they come down. We start to look at stuff again and build more platforms, it goes up, and then we start to reserve and do saving plans and it comes down. And I think people think that it's a straight edge, and it definitely isn't when you're working within the cloud.
Yeah, and I suppose absolutely making sure that you've got the right partner and you're doing it in the right way might cost you initially, but actually the savings from doing it that way is key, I would expect.
Yeah, definitely. I think also it's getting a mentality within your, if you open up your AWS to your developers and to other teams, is that they understand the cleanup mechanism. Is that you're responsible for cleaning up your AWS accounts, or we're going to put a tool in. So within Brown, we've used a tool called AWS Nuke, which nukes the account in the sandboxes. Otherwise, costs get quite high. And there's things like that we work with clients to do, to be able to make sure that they have control of their costs.
Great. There's a question specifically for Diane. With respect to your business operating model, did you have to change or adapt anything to fit into the cloud way of working?
So yeah, I think we've made some changes, but I think we'd already recognised as a business and as an IT department that we needed to make some changes internally to try to work to more of an agile methodology. So we'd already kind of got started on the transition to working into a squad model. So I think being that model did help us. And then also we needed to make sure that, like I say, most of the work that we do at the moment is based around that CapEx model and that sign off for that CapEx spend. Whereas this is a different way of working. We're not having that huge CapEx upfront infrastructure payment and then off we go. You're not going to have it up front, but it is going to come over time and it's going to increase over time. And that understanding with the accountants, with the board, that the CFO, that this is a different operating model. And I think it's just an education piece. And again, AWS were helpful to us. And our account manager, Danny, offered many occasions, I'll go and sit in front of whoever you want, whether it's your board, whether it's your CFO, your CIO, whoever needs help in understanding that different method of working. And the best way of doing that. So that was really helpful just to get that assistance. But then also I think we've also as a team work differently from that operating model as well. So there's so many ways you can work, and we're still finding some of our feet in terms of the right way of including our cloud engineers into the squads. Currently we have a separate a cloud operations team that function on the support of and the maintainability of what we've got in the cloud, a lot of what we've got in the cloud. And then we've also got our squads that are delivering a lot of the key services at the moment, and we have engineers that are working closely with them. And I think there's quite a few different ways of operating in that model, and it's just finding what works the best for your organization without disrupting everything too much.
Okay, we out of time, but I'm just going to quickly, Nalesh's question around technical difficulties in migration with limitation of hybrids. Tina, just a quick flash answer.
There was a huge amount of technical limitations. So the version that they were on was, I think it was 6.1 at the time. And they were going to 6.5, so we had to actually do an upgrade of Hybris. That was quite time consuming. We then had to get the bespoke code. We were working on trying to move the database from Oracle to MySQL. In the end, we failed that because of the amount of blobs in the database. Now, anybody who knows Oracle database will know what they mean. We also had then the bandwidth of the network on the VPN was 17 meg, and we had to do different things to try and get around that. There was a huge amount of learning as part of the Hybris migration. We overcame everything because obviously we migrated it to AWS, but I'd need a bit more time on that question, to be honest with you.
I'm sure if Nilesh wants to contact you directly, he can ask. Get a bit more detail. But thank you very much, Jessica, for organizing the event, and to Romy, Tina, and Diane for your very interesting presentations and insights. being an agile company, we thrive on feedback, and it's basically an essential part of our DNA. So we will be sharing the presentation and this recording with you, but we will be asking for feedback in exchange for that very insightful information. So we would really appreciate that feedback. It obviously helps us to improve these events. But thank you very much all for attending, and looking forward to seeing you in the next event. Thank you.